Hi, welcome to Session Time. I'm Will, and with me today is Ryan Burton. Ryan's a local producer that we've worked with on several projects, and over the next couple of episodes, we'll be going over basically the construction of a song from pre-production through home studio tracking, through professional studio tracking, mixing, and mastering. The We'll break it down into several parts. Today, for instance, we're basically going to go over pre-production and recording drums. Both of those two were involved enough that I'm not sure how much more we could really get into. Ryan co-produced this with Ross Childress, who was one of the original members of Collective Soul, and Ross played all the guitars on it. So almost all of the guitars.
Almost, but he did an amazing job, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So could you tell us a little bit about pre-production, how the song kind of formed?
Absolutely. Lynnay Della Luce, who wrote Soaked in Gasoline, the song that we're talking about here today, she and I met in January. She sent me an initial draft of the song, which really didn't amount to more than a drum machine, electric guitar, a bass, and a vocal. And we went from there. And obviously the song right now available in iTunes, we're at that mastered, finished point, and you can hear it. And it really started from something very small and amounted into something very cool. But we started with it. My initial take as a producer when I hear something is I look for the best parts of the song. And in Soaked in Gasoline, the chorus, she already kind of had a good framework of the chorus. It was initially called Sugar, Sugar, by the way. And we found Soaked in Gasoline in there, buried in there, which we thought was kind of a cooler, more engaging title. So we found the better parts. The song kind of reminded me a little bit of Rats Round and Round, I think it's called initially when I heard it. If you hear the song, you might hear a little bit of that. But so we looked for the best parts. My initial job with Lynnay was arranging, and piecing the song together. As a producer, I'm always trying to edit things in a way that they're interesting. I think that if you have things go on for too long that are repetitive, you lose the listener's attention. So if you listen to the song, you'll hear, the movement through different parts of the song. Once we had the arrangement down, then it was a matter of writing the different parts. Mm-hmm. And initially, I wrote the drum part, the bass part. Lynnay, pretty much the acoustic part, and the electric part was there initially. And so there was all those pieces put together. We made a decision. Probably a month into the process of working on this song. And this is Lynnay's really her first foray into a real professional recording studio, like a reel-to-reel. She'd never worked at this level before. And so we decided we were going to come in and do this. So we hired a drummer, and we needed a guitar player. And Lynnay had met Ross earlier. And it was a total coincidence, my relationship to Reel, and obviously Reel being the studio that Collective Soul was born in, and Ross has a long history, and so we immediately became friends, invited Ross in. His exceptional talent made it obvious to make him a co-producer. So he started bringing things to the table, but we essentially wrote the parts, rehearsed the parts, and prepared them, really overly prepared them in advance to even calling Reel and booking the studio time.
Yeah, at that point you were tracking with your home studio.
Correct, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What made you decide that, okay, this needs to go beyond home studio?
Well, I had the confidence. Most of the projects that, we've done together at Reel and I've done, I kind of started in the studio, mm-hmm. but this one I had this confidence, this belief I could really do it all at home. And it was just, you can't get the sounds at home that you can get in a professional studio like a reel-to-reel. Whether it's microphones, whether it's the room, whether it's the speakers, you can't accomplish it. And, I thought at this phase maybe I could hit some of those marks, and it was the drums.
So
the drums.
Were you considering doing drum samples, or were you trying to track live drums at home?
No, and that's a great question. We hadn't gotten to the point of considering live drums at home, although I wouldn't, be sort of adverse to that. I think we maybe could have, but we were thinking MIDI drums,
yeah.
and we were thinking samples,
yeah.
until I realized that just wasn't cutting what
right.
I wanted to cut.
The one thing about generally trying to record live drums at home, most people's rooms are square or rectangular, and you end up with standing waves, and you end up with drums that sound like they were recorded in a square or rectangular room. So that's one thing that I would always recommend you at least bring to a professional studio is drum tracking. But there's so much extra. There's so much else that we can help you do more efficiently than you can do at home.
Well, one of the big parts is obviously the engineer, and Will McPhaul is playing two roles today, that of host, and he was also the engineer of the song and did a fantastic job. But Will, those engineer skills, Pro Tools proficiency, you just can't be a one-man band and do everything. And so obviously we made that realization, and and to take it to that another level.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that when the session came in, Thomas, the drummer that you found, was the most prepared drummer that you see. I mean, he came in and his first take was as good as his last take because of all of the pre-production work that had already happened. When
Absolutely.
this project came into us, we didn't record to a click track on this. We recorded to a pre-recorded backing track, which were your practice tracks from home.
Absolutely.
That way, everything was just as smooth here as it had been as Thomas was recording his practice tracks.
One of the things I realized in this process, Will, and we worked on this together a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you were involved in the pre-production, and Reel to Reel was involved from early on, and a mentor in this project. And I'll say that one of the things I realized, and I hadn't realized fully before, is you really start producing it at home as if you're in the studio. And you're doing, scratch tracks and different tracks. Some of those tracks made it to the final session. They made it in, and even with the pre-production with drums. I mean, we produced Thomas at home and prepared him like he was here. So, and same thing with vocals with Lynnay. So everybody was ready when they got here, and obviously cuts down on recording time. But that mindset, that mentality, that's how you deliver those tracks that way.
Yeah, the only thing that really changed once they came here were microphone selection and sonic spaces. The rooms changed. So the sounds got better, but the performances were probably very similar.
Yeah. They were really done. I mean, every piece of it. And even, it's very interesting, and I've told this to a lot of people as far as production goes now. Ross and I did a lot of what we did as co-producers via email. I mean, we would send, we'd have sessions, we were working on back and forth, send things, and it sounds very, it doesn't sound quite as rock and roll and as intimate as we all kind of know and remember maybe from the 90s. But and I was actually making music in the 90s too, by the way. So I remember tape. But it really was effective and efficient, and we'd share ideas. And I'm really pleased with the production and what we were able to accomplish. And again, it wasn't a lot of studio days. Very cost-effective way to approach it.
Yeah, this was pretty much the model of how to integrate a home studio with a professional studio. All of the pre-production was done in your home. All of the planning was done in your home. We came in here, we tracked, and then a lot of the editing was even done at the home.
Even post. I mean, once we were here, we did some post. The integration was phenomenal. And really, to tell you the truth, this was what we were doing was happening even before any of this was conceived. So it wasn't like we went through a process saying, well, we're going to do a session time, so let's create a song in a way that speaks nicely to the people watching. We really did this in a way that I really tried to avoid the studio. I really tried to avoid it. But the integration of this is one that we will forever use as our template. It was very effective.
The reason he was trying to avoid studios was to reduce costs. But when he started looking at what he would have to purchase in order to replicate the result you would get from the studio, you soon find out that renting studio time and using it efficiently is actually a much better use of your money than going out and trying to buy gear and then having to learn how to use that gear and still have to overcome the fact that you're in rooms that weren't built specifically for a sonic space.
I mean, I was working in recording studios in the early 90s in some pretty fantastic rooms, and have had all this experience and thought there are certain things that I could do, but ultimately, any great recording, again, back to you can't really be a one-man band. You can't properly really engineer yourself and perform and record and do everything to the level. Because ultimately, we all, when we're recording and making music, we want it to be radio ready. We want to release something that they can compare against everything else out there, and you can do that today. But ultimately, you do need the proper speakers to reach certain marks. But
oh, come on! You mean you can't mix psychically? And that's one issue that so many people have is playback speakers simply can't reproduce everything that you're trying to hear and make judgment calls on.
Right. But again, the tools we have today, the preparation you're able to do, with Pro Tools. Like I think I told you even before we started this today, my analogy of bringing home the 2-inch tape machine back in the 90s.
Yeah.
If I could have done that, and married it all together, to be able to sit in your comfortable chair at home and work on some edits, for those of us fortunate enough to have Pro Tools at home, the marrying together and that mindset of this is, I think, the right approach. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
even established acts. I mean, you don't have to spend hours and hours editing and doing things in the studio. You can do them at home, but the pre-production, again, there was really no difference with this song in pre-production versus what I was accustomed to in the early '90s with my rock band. Is we prepared Thomas, we hitting all the drums and all the parts, and we prepared the practicing, the perfection. We prepared like he was going to be in the studio playing it, and not making up a fill in the studio, and
Yeah.
and that preparation was what got us where we needed to be.
Yeah, no, Thomas was exceptionally well prepared. Really, the only thing we had to do once he came in was set up drums, set up drum mics. The only decision we made was on snares. We all liked the sound of a deep snare on this particular in the room, but when we played it against the pre-production track, we realized pretty quickly that deep snare was not going to cut through the song. So we made a choice based on the song, not just based on the sound of the drum, and the drum that we chose was just perfect for it. So on that, let's take a look at what we did with drums.
One of the ways that I prepared for the session was working a lot with Ryan. He and Lynnay kind of worked the song out, started writing, and in pre-production and stuff, he kind of came up with the drum parts as far as through software in his computer, and then I came in at his house and just did a rough little recording, and then we kind of picked at all the different little fills and parts, going to be over here, closed hi-hats, open hi-hats, or on the ride, crash and wailing with him, so that when I came in today, it was just go straight through it. There was a couple little knickknacks that we worked out and stuff with fills and stuff like that, but for the most part, that's how we prepared for today, was just a lot of prep and work on exactly what I was going to play beforehand.